Were you always, you used the word spiritual. Was that a word in your vocabulary always? Did it arise 2 years ago? Like, how did that become a path to a lot of this healing and journey that you've been on, as opposed to something else? Like, I think there's so many options. Why this? Why, how?
I mean, I grew up Christian. I went to a Presbyterian church, which I definitely do not align with those teachings anymore. But I do believe in God. I do call myself a Christian, but I also call myself very spiritual. And I think 2 years ago, the lockdown was forcing me to go through this healing journey by myself. And my journey through healing was through spiritual healing and through working with actual healers and energy. And I started to study Reiki, and I'm gonna get my master's. I mean, I'm going to be a Reiki master.
Yes.
At the end of the summer.
That's amazing.
Thank you. So it became I'm going to look inward is sort of what it was. And I found that became, that's clearly a very spiritual route. You're looking in towards your spirit, towards your soul. You're doing shadow work, soul searching. So I was like, okay. Spirituality is the word that I'm resonating with. Yeah. And I actually went to Mount Shasta, which is a very high vibrational, highly spiritual place in Northern California. And I went there by myself, and I worked with she calls herself a sound healer. And I worked with her and found the experience. I just, again, felt very much like I was so at home with myself while I was doing those things, so connected to myself, connected to my higher self, the person that I want to be. And so I thought, yes, this is the right path for me. And so kind of ever since then, I've been very into spirituality. And, I've always loved crystals. Everyone loves crystals, but like looking past that into a deeper form of energy healing. And that led me to Reiki, which led me to sound healing and going to sound baths and then meditation. And I took a course and I learned TM, Transcendental Meditation, which wasn't really it didn't super resonate with me. It hasn't stuck with me, but it is something that I tried. So it's been a trial of just different things. And I guess that's just what I call when I say I'm spiritual. I'm on that very personal journey with myself, looking inward.
Yeah,
is sort of what I mean by that.
Yeah, but I love those examples because it is a practicing of different methods and techniques to find what works for you. And you've obviously found, both in Reiki and sound healing, what really soothes your soul and your healing, which I think is such an important part of it. I think spirituality or healing or any of these terms can often they're so big, and they can get a good or bad name based on a particular practice. And the idea is that it's just such a big umbrella term for so many practices that it's so important that people keep an open mind to finding what works for them. And you're right, there may be a certain aspect that just doesn't, float your boat and doesn't make you feel great, but there's other parts that could reveal it to you, very powerfully. I think when I lived as a monk, we traveled a lot in southern India, where a lot of temples are around 2,000 to 5,000 years old. And I never had been anywhere that old. Like my school was 500 years old that I went to in England. And so that was pretty old. Yeah. But then when you go
Mine was like 80 years old.
Yeah, exactly. My school is literally 1573, I think was the year it was founded. Oh my gosh. By the Queen in England.
Insane.
And so our school was pretty old and had this big history. But when I went to these temples that were like 2,000, 5,000 years old, and you see this incredible architecture, it's maintained. I never realized that I found going on pilgrimage to be so deeply healing for me, because I would go into these chambers where sound, similarly, has been maintained and preserved for thousands of years. People have meditated, chanted, played bowls, gongs, whatever it may be, in these spaces, and you can still feel the reverberation when you walk in.
Oh, that sounds so amazing.
And it's really powerful. Like it really feels like, you know, and so again, that was something that I never would have known growing up in London and, you know, having to go to that experience. And those temples are mainly in southern India.
Sounds like I need to go to southern India.
Yeah, where you see that like real ancient history of spirituality in southern India. And so those kind of places for me were like things that I never thought I'd discover. And then there's parts that I'm like, yeah, I would never go and do X, Y, Z. So how did you find these things, or were there friends, were there recommendations? Was it the internet? Like, how were you discovering certain things for you? Because I feel like that's quite difficult for people to find.
I mean, it's easy in LA because you're surrounded by people who are... there's a crystal shop on every corner, genuinely. And
there's a tarot card reader.
Truly. And I think I was always like... oh, tarot is interesting. That happened, you know, a couple of years ago. I bought my first tarot deck. And Reiki, actually, a makeup artist on Riverdale who worked on the first and second season, she was a Reiki master, and she was telling me about it, and one day performed Reiki on me, and I was like, whoa, this is so cool. And so I was always super interested in diving into that, and then the lockdown just kind of gave me a boost to explore that, because I was like, damn, I could use some healing. Maybe I should heal myself. And then it also just came from, I think, the word wellness. Like, what is wellness? And I Googled wellness retreats in California. And I was like, okay, maybe not a retreat. I don't really want to be doing yoga and eating vegetables for a week. Like, not necessarily my vibe. I wanted to be a little bit more personalized and grounding for just me. And I found my sound healer in Mount Shasta. And so I went and saw her by myself and really kind of had a firsthand experience of sound healing and past life readings and cord cutting ceremonies, and not astral projection, but just sort of your astral bodies and things like that. It was like this world that was suddenly opening up to me that was so, I've always just found this kind of the afterlife, I guess, very fascinating. I've always been terrified and intrigued at the idea of ghosts and like what's that? Like, what is talking to a spirit, you know? It's so weird. And I've always felt like I've been very highly intuitive, kind of in-tuned person. Oh, I see symbols and I see things are very serendipitous, and there's all these coincidences that are happening. And so I also was looking into, and to be honest, TikTok was...
After all of that was not what I was expecting. I was not expecting.
But there is such a spiritual side of TikTok that is so vast.
Can you put me onto that side?
Yes. I mean, it's the algorithm. You start seeing one video and then you're seeing a million of them. And I was stumbling on these pages of just like highly intuitive people. And I reached out to one of them and said, do you offer mentorships or something? And she said, yeah. And so I did a mentorship with a psychic for 3 months, where she taught me how to heal my ancestral trauma. And I believe we all have psychic abilities. It's a matter of training your brain. Some people are just born being more in tune and tapped into that skill, but I do believe that we all have the ability to tap into them. So I was really just trying to learn how to do that because I thought that was so fascinating. She did teach me how to talk to the deceased. Wow. Not that I can do it well. I will say I feel that I've only successfully done it like twice or 3 times. And even then, while you're doing it, you're sort of like, am I doing this? Like,
most people, when they would hear these things, there's judgment about, that's just wacky, or that's whatever. Like, but what I'm seeing in you, which I'm appreciating, is just, hey, I'm trying to be me. Like, I'm right now I'm exploring this. Right now I'm experimenting with this. I'm learning this. Maybe it's something that I believe is true. Maybe it isn't, but I'm at least doing what I want to do now without worrying about what everyone else thinks and believes. I mean, when I chose to become a monk at 21 going on 22, 99% of my friends thought I was absolutely insane, because they're like, why would you do that? Like, why would you not want to go make money and date more women and get into another relationship and get a home or whatever it was? And so I know what it feels like to make a decision that most people around me feel doesn't make any sense and is completely against the grain of, but it was the best decision I ever made in my life. And I have zero regrets about that decision or how I spent that 3 years. And I look back at it all the time. But at the time, everyone around me thought I was making the worst decision. My family said I was committing career suicide. You know, my friends were completely confused. My society and people in our community were like, oh, you're letting your parents down and you'll never get a job again. You know, there's just so much judgment.
Yeah.
But I was just trying to do what felt right in my intuition at this time, and it wasn't harming anyone. And I think that's the, you know, that to me is like the barrier where it's like, well, you're trying something, it's not harming anyone. It's not harming you, it's not harming anyone around you. And if that's allowing you to explore a part of yourself, you just never know where it could go. So it's very comforting for people to hear about being into unique things, because it's almost like we all followed the same people. We all watch the same things, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's nice to have a few things that are unique. A break from the norm. Exactly, a break from the norm. I want to talk to you a bit about, you know, this new show, and we were talking about this idea of you get to play these two parallel lives, which kind of with everything you're talking about, is fascinatingly connected. And I love that idea of parallel universes, of multiple lives, of the multiverse right now is
such a big thing
and a big talking point. Yeah. When you're playing these roles, how much of these roles are you identifying with, especially, I guess, like moving to LA for a career that's very much in line with you.
Yeah.
And then obviously becoming a pregnant mother.
I haven't experienced that
one
yet,
you haven't experienced. Like when you're doing that, how much of what you've just talked about that you're interested in kind of feeds into those roles, and when you're playing those roles and becoming these new identities?
Well, for the film, people ask, like, was it so hard to play two different characters? No, it's the same woman. So it's the same girl, just experiencing two very different things. And so that was amazing to play this woman, and I knew who she was, and I created her as a character. I knew what she valued, what she wanted, and I was, you know, we're fortunate enough as an audience to see both things play out. It is weird because I'm very into, I do have those existential, like, if I did make this decision, what would have happened?
Yeah, sliding doors.
And how, you know, how would things have panned out? And the reason why I loved the script so much when I read it was she's okay in both lives. She ends up being okay.
Wow.
And there is no one path that you go, oh, that was the right path or that was the wrong path. It's truly just two different paths. Yeah. And I think, especially in your 20s, things happen every day. Relationships end, things, you know, people, you can get pregnant and you think, oh, my whole life is just gone, or my whole world is shifting. And I don't think that's has to be a bad thing.
Yeah.
I think there are millions of ways your life can turn out. Mm-hmm. It's based off decisions you make every single day, but in the end, things are okay.
Yeah.
Things end up okay. I think if you stop and put too much thought into every decision you make, you're going to live a very treacherous life of feeling like you're walking on eggshells. I think it's a matter of saying, I mean, I personally like to look at it as the universe has my back.
Yeah.
And so I think this film also resonates with how I feel in that regard of this woman she had a positive pregnancy test and a negative one. And you see two possible scenarios out of a million of what her life could have been. Mm-hmm. And you see the journey she goes on through both, and how she still has the same ambition, and she doesn't lose herself in having a child. She still stays who she is, and she doesn't lose her ambition. And when she goes to LA and goes through the hardships of trying to make her career work, she doesn't give up. You know, it's sort of a perseverance story, and how you don't have to lose yourself in the things that happen to you. You can still stay you.
Yeah. The thing that resonates most with me with that message and the whole conversation we've had today is this idea that even in one life, you can be so many things.
Yeah.
And I think we always are trying to make this choice, as you're saying, like, it's like, well, do I do this? And how will that impact me? Or do I do this? And it's like, you could probably do both.
Yeah.
I mean, you've lived so many different lives. And I know most
people...
So
have you.
Yeah, and so have I. And most people I know have lived loads of different lives. And I think we feel forced to live one life and one truth. And I don't think that's true for anyone in reality. And when you force yourself to live one life and one truth, you actually limit what you started with, was with all these experiences and all these experiments and an openness to all these feelings. So, I like that idea of the two lives into ultimately that both work out okay. And recognizing in one life you can live 3 lives or 7 and things can be okay. With that in mind,